Spoofing, repudiation, and elevation of privilege all sound somewhat similar. Could you tell us more about the differences between them and how they relate to each other?
Yeah, there definitely are some similarities between the three. And to not to confuse anyone all the more, but I'm going to pull in another acronym and actually reuse another acronym of AAA. But in this context, when we're talking about security, AAA usually refers to authentication or identification, authorization or to give permission, and accounting is to log an audit trail. And all three of these things really need to be enforced in any system that's going to consider itself secure. And so to bring those back up, spoofing is usually going to be tied to authentication. And this is, again, you really, to avoid spoofing, you need to be able to strongly enforce the identification of the users of the system. And this is where authentication is going to come into play. How are you authenticating your users and how are you maintaining that authentication across a session? Then there's authorization, again, or to give permission. And this is really what's going to directly tie to the elevation of privilege. So there's different authority levels that users may be able to make calls against, and it's going to be the authorization controls that prevent, a normal level user from being able to make an administrative level call. And so by enforcing authorization, we're going to hopefully be able to prevent elevation of privileges. And then finally, with accounting, that's going to be the mitigation for repudiation. So by actually keeping a concise and accurate audit trail of all of the actions performed within a system, we are going to be able to, uh, you know, know who performed what action, and repudiation is no longer going to be a threat.
Those threats alone seem to be very broad, and that's not including the other threats that you mentioned as a part of Stride. How do we begin to address these threats as we identify them?
So yeah, anyone who's using these frameworks is probably going to quickly find out that like, hey, there's a lot more threats than I expected. There's a lot of work that needs to go into these mitigations, and we don't have enough time to get this all done. And what you're really running into is the fact is, perfect security is never going to actually be obtainable. You can never have that perfectly secure system, not one that's actually going to be able to be used by users. I always say that there's a spectrum that you have to find the perfect point for in between usability and security, and every security decision is going to be somewhere along that spectrum. I always say the most secure system in the world is a server. You design it however you want. I'm going to take it, wrap it in chains, throw it in the ocean. No one's going to hack into that thing. Granted, no one can use it, no one can hack it. So when it comes to, figuring out like what things are most important to an organization, you have to think what are the worst case scenario uh, items that could happen to this system, to this process. What are the crown jewels that if they're the stolen is going to be, the end of the world for the organization? And using those to prioritize the threats is going to help you prioritize which mitigations are most important to address early, from the beginning.
Okay, then. Anything in particular that a game developer should prioritize?
For a game developer, those priorities are going to probably be somewhere, not necessarily in order that I'm saying them, but one big thing is going to be IP. The different parts of the game that this game developer has built, and it's a very competitive industry, and no one wants to let their secrets out. They want to keep the inner workings of their game to themselves, both from competitors as well as the hackers out there and anyone who's looking to dive into the nitty gritty of how that game is built. The next probably another important item is going to be the player data. These are the players that are trusting you with their information. They potentially may have payment card information or, personal information like email, mailing address, things like that. And that's all information you probably want to keep protected, and depending on where the developer and the players live, it may actually be like a legal requirement that everything be tracked and protected. So if that got out, it's both going to be fallout from your player base as well as potential fines and other legal implications. Oh, yeah, and we already talked about availability. It's an online game. You have to be able to connect and be online to play it. So keeping those game services available is probably going to be, a very close runner-up to those first two, priority issues that game developers are going to worry about.
All of this sounds a little bit like risk assessment. Would you agree? And if so, are there any different frameworks for risk assessment as opposed to threat modeling?
Oh yeah, and it's risk assessment is a very, a common security practice, and often sometimes is what it's kind of like building a threat model for the entire organization, not just one piece of software. And there's a number of frameworks available depending on, the industry, what you're targeting, things like that. One popular one is the NIST cybersecurity framework. Anyone in healthcare is going to be relating to HIPAA and high tech, as far as like compliance. Things that a game developer is probably going to worry about. One is going to be, the customer data and the protections. It's going depending on where they are, both the developer as well as the player. You might be affected by GDPR if any of your players are from Europe. And then depending on where the developer is located or the player, there may be other potential like legal ramifications around that data. What happens if there's a breach and things like that. And so, those frameworks are going to help that organization identify all the issues they need to address and potentially even apply for, compliance if that's something that's a requirement.
Now that we have an overview of threat modeling, my question is, who should conduct threat modeling?
Oh yeah, that's an easy answer. Anyone and everyone. I really do feel like threat modeling can be used to, help make any decision throughout your life. Especially ones in terms of, technology and computers, but it doesn't have to be. When we are talking about software design, there's really like two major parties that need to be involved. I would say, one is going to be the development leads. This is an individual or group who contributed and built this system or application that we're running through the threat modeling exercise. They're going to know this thing better than anyone else because they built it, and they're going to be able to flesh out the threat model with information about everything that's going on in the system, what the potential mitigations and controls that are in place or could be put in place, and that. The other side is going to be the security focused individuals. This may either be, a security engineer like myself. It may also just be, another member of the development team who has, security experience or, has a specialty or a focus or, on it. And they're going to be able to come from the second set of eyes, another perspective, and potentially even maybe taking, a look at it from an attacker's mindset, and really trying to enumerate all the potential weaknesses and issues that the system might have that maybe the builders didn't see. Um, and this group's going to come together and be able to really truly flesh out a threat model that's going to enumerate all the issues and the mitigations that could be put in place. Here at AWS, we actually employ all three types. The When it comes to when AppSec review needs to get kicked off, the development lead and a security champion from their team work together, to build out the request and the threat model, and then pull in an AppSec engineer, and everyone works together to enumerate all those issues and discuss the mitigations that and controls are being put in place to deal with all of those threats.
Thank you, Connor, for joining us today and giving us a thorough overview of threat modeling.
Yeah, Trent, thank you so much for having me here. I'm always excited to talk about video game security. It's truly a passion of mine. And just want to thank you again for having me here. I do really hope that, any game developers, new, past, future, upcoming, uh, that watch this, found value, and this helps them, to start or continue their threat modeling journey when it comes to building out their games and making sure that it truly is secure for their players. So with that, everyone, good luck, stay safe and healthy, and GG.